Let us pray. Loving God, give us the power to bless our children through our example, our love, our prayers and our teaching. May each of them become the kind of person that attracts others to you as we give thanks for Rebecca, her life and her role as one of the many mothers in the Bible. Rebecca's name means loop or tie. She was hardworking and generous. The news of Rebecca's birth was told to her uncle Abraham before the binding of Isaac, the episode in which Abraham was told by God to bring Isaac as a sacrifice on a mountain. Many years after the binding of Isaac, Sarah, Abraham's wife, died. After taking care of her burial, Abraham went about finding a wife for his son Isaac, who was already 37 years old. So, as the story we heard this morning, he commanded his servant Eliezer to go to his birthplace and to select a bride from his family. And so his servant did, with responsibility. Before she left her family home, the family sent Rebecca off with Deborah, her nurse, and blessed her and said to her, "Our sister, may you come to be 1,000 myriads and may your offspring inherit the gates of its foes." As Rebecca and her entourage approached Abraham's home, they spied Isaac from a distance in the fields. The Talmud and the Midrash, which are Jewish writings, explain that Isaac was praying as he instituted the afternoon prayer. Seeing such a spiritually exalted man, Rebecca immediately dismounted from her camel and asked the servants who he was. When she heard that this was her future husband, she modestly covered herself with a veil. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, married her and loved her. There are 3 miracles that are characterised with Sarah's tent while she was alive, and these disappeared at her death but reappeared when Rebecca entered the tent. These were a lamp burning in the tent from Shabbat to the end of Shabbat. There was a blessing in her dough, and a cloud hovered over her tent, symbolising the divine presence of God. Some of the events leading up to the marriage of Isaac and Rebecca have been institutionalised in the traditional Jewish wedding ceremony. Before the bride and groom stand under the kippah, they participate in a special ceremony called veiling. The bridegroom is led to the bride by 2 escorts, and seeing her covers her face with a veil, similar to the way Rebecca covered her face before marrying Isaac. Then the bridegroom, or the father of the bride, or the officiating rabbi, recites the same blessing over the bride that Rebecca's family recited over her. "Our sister, may you come to be 1,000 of the myriads, and may your offspring inherit the gates of its foes." According to the traditional counting cited in Rashi, which is another Jewish writing, Isaac was 27 years old at the time of Isaac's binding. Sarah, who gave birth to Isaac when she was 90, died after the binding, and she was 127 years old, making Isaac around 37 at the time. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebecca. 20 years went by before they had children. Throughout that time, both Isaac and Rebecca prayed vehemently to God for offspring, and God eventually answered Isaac's prayers and Rebecca conceived. During her pregnancy, she was very uncomfortable, and so she went to seek some advice in order to enlighten herself, and she received a prophecy that she did not share with her husband, and it was about the 2 fighting twins in her womb that would continue to fight all their lives. The prophecy also said that the older one would serve the younger. One people will be stronger than the other has been taken to mean that the 2 nations will never gain power simultaneously. When one falls, the other will rise, and vice versa. When the time came for Rebecca to give birth, the first child came out, emerged red and hairy all over, with his heel grasped by the hand of the second as he came out. The Bible states that Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. Scripture notices also that the attitudes of their parents towards the boys differed. Isaac loved Esau because He did eat of his hunting, but Rebekah loved Jacob. We know the story of how Jacob stole Esau's birthright. We heard it this morning. Isaac became blind in his old age and decided to bestow the blessing of the firstborn upon Isaac. According to the Midrash, Isaac had reached 132 years of age when this happened. And Isaac, when he died, was 180. Jacob lived with Laban for 20 years, marrying Laban's 2 daughters and 2 maidservants. He returned to Canaan with his large family and servants and possessions. As he did, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried at a place that Jacob called Tree of Weepings. According to the Midrash, that's a Jewish writing, the plural form of the word weepings indicates a double sorrow, implying that Rebekah also died at this time. Her death was not mentioned explicitly for several reasons. The first, she needed to be buried secretly. Had she had the type of burial she deserved, Esau would probably have attended, and there was a risk of Rebekah being treated disrespectfully as one who gave birth to such a wicked son. And 2, she was buried in tragic circumstances. Isaac was blind and could not come to honour her properly. Jacob was away, and Esau refused to come because he still hated her for taking away his blessings. Finally, during her life, Rebekah, like Sarah, would become the matriarch of God's people, and her heart would be divided. It would be divided between faith and doubt, believing that God's promise required her intervention, finding it hard to rest in the promise of God and what God had done. Much like Sarah, she resorted to trickery to achieve it. One of my favourite parts of this scriptures read this morning is when the servant put the ring in her nose and the bracelet on her arms. It's like giving someone a wedding ring. A nose ring was an acceptable form of adornment in ancient times, and so the giving of jewels. In the instance of Rebekah, Abraham's servant immediately got out the jewels he had bought once he realised she was the one that Isaac would be marrying. The story of Rebekah is rich and colourful. Let us give thanks for her life. Amen.